and we go straight into our very first panel on the topic of digital transformation. And for this, I'd like to welcome and introduce our guests this morning. And we start on my left. We have Henriette Wendt, good morning, the newly appointed COO of Axpo Group. She actually just is finishing her role at Microsoft Switzerland, where she was COO and member of the management board. She was also a board member of several companies, including Sunrise, and was also responsible for strategy at Swisscom a few years ago. Welcome.
Thank you.
And then I'd like to actually go to one of our remote panelists joining us. I'd like to welcome Marina Bellini. She's joining us, if I understand, from the UK, right? Good morning, Marina.
Good morning.
Okay, Marina Bellini joined BAT as Chief Information Officer in 2018, and in January 2019 she was appointed Director Digital and Information. In her role on the management board, she's responsible for driving digital transformation of BAT. Prior to joining the company, she worked in many countries, including Brazil, USA, Mexico, or Belgium, mostly as CIO for companies, including PepsiCo. And one of her very first jobs was actually at PwC in Brazil. Just mentioning that because we're here at PwC in Zurich. Good morning. Then we go to Stefano Santinelli, who is the CEO of Local Search. Prior to joining Swisscom Directories, he built 3 startups, sat on the board of directors of 5 companies, co-built a $1 billion business, and launched 3 new B2C platforms. He has an MBA of the University of Rochester. And then joining us remotely as well, we have Sreedhar Natarajan. Welcome. He's joining us remotely from France. He's a CFO of the construction materials manufacturer Saint-Gobain, and he's joining, as I said, from France, I think, right? Good morning, Sreedhar.
Good morning. Good morning.
And he joined Saint-Gobain in 2003 and had several positions, including VP of Abrasives in India. He's also a board member of Grindwell Norton Limited as non-executive director. And last but not least, we have Pascal Grieder here on location. He has been the CEO of Salt Mobile since 2018. Prior to that, he was managing partner digital at McKinsey, Switzerland, where he consulted international telecommunication providers for over 10 years, and he holds a PhD of ETH Zurich. Great, so those are our panelists of the day, and I'd like to start with a very basic question. Digital transformation, it's kind of a buzzword. I feel everyone wants to do it, but I'd like to have a small definition, or at least what you understand under digital transformation. Who wants to go first? Maybe let's start with you, Henriette.
So yes, it has become a buzzword, but I think we've seen in the COVID pandemic how important the topic really is, and how many companies have had to accelerate that digital journey. I would say, so fundamentally, if we cut it down to the key topics, it's about strategy. So this is about a strategy. It's not a project on the side. Secondly, of course, it's about the technology. And thirdly, and very importantly, it's also about the culture. It's about how you collaborate, how you build a culture that is in particular based on insights. This is about serving customers differently. It's about operating differently, for example, leveraging and integrating technology. But in order to do that, you really need to have a culture where people everywhere in an organization can leverage insights.
Great, thank you very much. Just a quick note to the audience. I also want to mention that, of course, you can send in your questions to all of our speakers via the function, the Q&A function, and I will try to integrate those throughout the panel. So maybe let's go. Yes, Stefano, do you agree with Henriette or anything else to add?
I absolutely agree. For me, it's a tremendous growth opportunity for every leader, top line and bottom line. When we started at Swisscom Directories, our digital transformation 5 years ago, we were basically a publisher of a phone book. Today, after 5 years, we are a full-service digital agency. We have more customers. We could increase profits 15%, and we're part of a global ecosystem working with Google, Instagram, Amazon. So it's really a tremendous growth opportunity, but you have to work much faster, agile. You have to have a totally different leadership style, and you have to be part of a global ecosystem, leverage global platforms, global technologies like artificial intelligence. Otherwise, you will be too slow and not fast enough.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you very much. I'd like to have Marina on it. Marina, what about you? Digital transformation, what does it mean?
Yeah, maybe just to add on Henriette and Stefano, you just said, Stefano, growth opportunity. The way we define it in BAT, I think aligns with what has been said before. We say it's about applying technologies and ways of working to deliver commercial value. So it doesn't need to be a new technology, can be an existing technology, but needs to be done differently and much faster, and value creation at the center on why we are doing what we are doing, but also knowing that you do many things that not necessarily are going to work, but by doing 10 experiments, we are going to find 1 or 2 that are really transformational. So that's it for us.
Great. Sreedhar, what about you?
Yes.
What does it mean for you and for your company, maybe, Saint-Gobain?
Yeah, maybe let me just say a few words about Saint-Gobain, because it's important to put the things in perspective, because Saint-Gobain is a market leader in providing the sustainable construction solutions. We have a manufacturing footprint of 70 countries, more than 40 billion turnover and 170,000 employees. We have this purpose of making the world a better home. Basically drives us all in the organization to constantly innovate, constantly look for high performance solutions, how we can contribute to protect our planet and improve our well-being. So coming to your question, what does the digital transformation means? To me, at least in Saint-Gobain, we clearly say that, it's no more a choice, because if you really want to deliver profitable growth and value creation, I think it's absolutely a must that even a company like Saint-Gobain, which is basically a B2B, needs to invest in digital transformation. In a digital world, you see that the customers are so much well informed. I mean, they have access to so much of information, and it's easy for them to find alternatives if you're not going to do the best job. And that's why it's important that you need to be constantly present and occupy the mind space.
Thank you very much. And now Pascal.
The last but not least.
Again.
Maybe I'd start from way back when I was in university, because I'm an engineer by training, and I think then the life was still simple. You had analog signals and you had digital signals. Digital signals are binary, analog signals are continuous. And if you digitize something, it meant to make binary. And it was very, very clearly defined. There was no doubt. There's a scientific definition. I think what we've done since is we've projected all our hopes and transformational visions and wishes into this word, into this buzzword of digitalization. So if you ask 10 people what it means, you will get slightly different definitions from 10 people, which are kind of overlapping, but in the end, they're not really the same. So I think we shouldn't strive to find the one key definition for it. I think digitalization comes in many shapes and sizes. And I think everybody needs to decide for themselves or within their own organization what is the best flavor for them to advance the business prospects.
Great, thank you very much. I'd like to pick up a few things that were mentioned. For instance, Stefano, you mentioned that you went from a Swiss publisher. You have to imagine it used to be actually a phone book, your business, to being a competitor with global players such as Amazon, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple. So quite an achievement. I wonder, how did you do that? Can you give us a concrete example, how digitalization helped you there?
First was to realize that our business had no future, which was a big step. And then to say, well, the future, the end of the company is coming very soon if we don't move. This was really the turning point. We redefined the purpose of the company from, publish a phone book to make small businesses successful in the digital space. We stopped developing our own things. We really took an open innovation approach. We bought technology worldwide, the global platform. We started working and leveraging the traffic and the reach of Google and Amazon. And we radically changed the way we work in going from 5 manager layers to 3. So, making the cadre, in Switzerland we talk about cadre, from 140 cadre to 30. And to move from yearly planning, 5 years plan to quarterly OKR, which we copied from Google. So we were able to ship 7 products within 1 year, and then to really bet on the products that future, and so renew our portfolio. And at the last piece, we were very brave in migrating our customer base. So we were very brave to say, look, the phone book has no future, and here is what you should do in the digital space. We could win 300,000 Swiss small businesses to come with us on the journey, and we still have this amount of customers, but for the digital space. And this was done not at the expense of profits, because we kept revenues and we increased profits by about 15%. So it was really a very successful journey, but there were a lot of very radical choices. For example, simplifying the organization, for example, moving to quarterly OKR, and really betting on global platforms for the global innovation.
So that is actually a very concrete example for agility as well that you mentioned before, and also making this cadre, the management, smaller. How did the board react to that? How was the relationship between CEO and board?
Well, if you deliver always the same amount of profits and you increase this, it's an easy discussion with the board. But of course, if we take these radical moves, the board sometimes gets scared. The board was very, very supportive. They supported our plan. At the end, as a CEO and senior leaders of the company, you have to do it and to deliver very fast, very quick results. Otherwise, the board will get insecure, and you will get a lot of discussion about whether this makes sense or not. So we were lucky that we could, keep the success. The board could see the success coming, and they gave us the empowerment that we needed. And we were lucky that we could push the empowerment and give the empowerment that our people need, with this really leaving the agility by having a very simple, very direct organizational leadership structure within the organization.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing that example. I'd like to hear more concrete examples of how you actually brought that transformation to your company. Maybe Pascal, from your perspective as a telecom provider, you have several areas where you invest in digital transformation. Can you maybe mention 2 or 3?
I think, sure. I'm happy to talk about 1 or 2, but I think it's important to think about this not as, let's say, carved out entities, but it's more like liquid cement that you pour into an organization. There's no part of the business that is not affected by digital in some shape or form today. I think, and this is true for most companies, most probably. I think the way I typically think about it for us, there's a digitalization at the customer interface. There's digitalization in the back end of how we manage the customer base. And there's digitalization of the operating model, so how we deliver the services that we provide. And clearly, at the front end, this is an ongoing effort where we are investing. Like, for instance, recently we deployed a new website. We will soon deploy the new e-shop and self-care tools. We've already done that for business customers last year, where we deployed a very innovative self-care platform, which we consider to be the best in the market end of last year. So this is something which happens on a day-by-day basis. But there's also, let's say, maybe more hype topics such as bots, so you can use artificial intelligence at the interface, where we were always extremely reluctant because we also, from personal experience, I don't like to talk to a bot. But we were very positively surprised how effective they are these days. So the technology has really picked up, and basically bots are able to answer a surprisingly large amount of the customer's queries directly on their own to the customer's full satisfaction, which obviously also opens up new possibilities. On the back end, we obviously use a lot of machine learning and advanced analytics to identify patterns, to identify opportunities, to predict customers' needs or issues before they realize them themselves, more or less, in order to be able to better serve our customers. But also on the back end, in the operating model, we have an operating model that is very much geared towards insourcing. So we actually develop most of the applications and services we provide in-house ourselves. So we do everything end-to-end in order to have full control of quality and cost along the entire value chain. And this has worked very well for us because it also makes us very quick to react and very agile to adapt to new market developments.
Great, thank you very much. I see a lot of nodding. I don't know if anyone wants to add to something that has just been said.
Yeah, maybe I can go and let me follow the lines of Sreedhar. Just talk a little bit about VAT before I talk of concrete examples of digital transformation. So we are a company that has been out there for over 100 years, top 5 FTSE, and with a business, combustible cigarettes, that is business that has been in volume declining over the past many years. We embarked on this transformation 7 years ago to create products of reduced risk to the consumers that choose not to quit smoking. Products that are 95, 98, 99% less harmful to one's health. So imagine what it is in terms of transformation for our organization, where we have one product worldwide, very standardized. Everything is about, scale, and that's where the value comes from, because you're not anymore marketing to the customers, to the consumers, and now you need this innovation engine, because I must say it's not easy to get consumers to adapt a product that they are not asking for, that you're pushing into them. So today we already have 3 categories. We already have over 10% of our business in this new category business. Long way to go, 30 million consumers to date. We aim to have over 50 million consumers on reduced risky products. But I like what I heard, because sometimes we talk digital transformation very consumer marketing oriented. And for this transformation to be successful, I think in any enterprise has to be end to end. So just very quickly, 3 examples. One is really on consumer, for us to acquire, convert, and retain the consumers. On the reduced risk products, we need to learn the consumers to begin with. And without technology, we used to do what I think most companies do, break consumers in segments of maybe 4. It's people that are innovators, that people that are very conservative, that people that, are going to experiment but not stick, and I don't know what would be the 4th one. With technology, with machine learning, in one of our markets that already is 50% of their revenue and profit in reduced risk products, we have 96 segments of consumers that we communicate very differently, engage very differently. And I mean, this used to be 16 segments last year. It's already 96, and I know we're going to eventually get to the segment of 1. So you can only do that by truly leveraging technology, data, and a different way of working, because you're not planning the campaign every 6 months or year for the product. You're planning this and executing every day and learning. So you see digital transformation, I think no surprise happening at the consumer side, but then you have to make it work for the customer. We need to make it work for the finance process, for the HR process, for the legal process, and for the supply chain. So just one example on the supply chain, I think we all read in the news a few weeks ago the blockage of the Suez Canal, where a lot of the products move around the globe, got stuck and went nowhere. Because of advanced technology, because of sensing technology, we were one of the first companies to understand what was happening and very quickly reroute our products and find alternative sources to still deliver to the customers that would then sell to the consumer. Without technology, we could not have made that move, and ultimately we managed to have 0 impact in our supply chain. That I feel that the teams did an amazing job, again, leveraging technology, leveraging data, and a very different way of working. Instead of planning your supply chain, for the next 6 months or a year, you had to plan in the hour, watching what was happening there. So thank you for the colleagues, because I think we are all talking about, digital transformation cuts across the organization.
Thank you very much, Marina, for this very concrete example with the Suez Canal. And then, Sreedhar, you mentioned you have to be the best in what you do, in the job. So you really tried to improve customer experience in the past few years. I wonder, how did you do that?
Yeah, it's Saint-Gobain is actually 355 years old, large French industrial group. So we know how to manufacture, we know to innovate, we have a technology-driven organization, but we were not that good in looking at customer needs. I think that was a real trigger to see how Saint-Gobain can transform itself as a more customer-focused, customer-centric organization. So that's where I think the digital transformation helped us in a big way, because we actually looked at how we can improve the customer experience. We actually literally walked through the complete journey of our customers in every single business to really see what are the areas, during this touch point, each of the touch point, what are the areas that we can bring some improvement so that there's an ease of doing business with Saint-Gobain. I think, it's very important that you need to see everything from customer's point of view. And if you're going to be driven internally and say, okay, this is my best product, but doesn't mean anything to the customer, because at the end of the day, the customer needs to realize. So that's why I think what Marina said, it's important to reach the customer, engage the customer actively, see how we can bring constantly the differentiated solutions. The other thing is, leverage the data, analytics. I think data is so powerful. If you can use the data, you can actually make more informed decisions every step of your journey with the customer. So it's been a great, your title of the program resonates so well with us because you have said, transform, energize, and grow. In Saint-Gobain, we've launched a transformation saying transform and grow. And it is so well received in the market and people understand the spirit. Like Pascal said, simplification of organization, making the organization more agile, empower them so that they're able to take the decisions. At the end of the day, everything what matters is how do you take care of your customer, proactively.
Thank you very much. We're going to get to data right after, but Henriette, so you just are just finishing up your job at Microsoft, already had your last day? Yes. Okay, good. But as you just left, I still would like to know, how did you at Microsoft think about digital transformation? How did the company transform itself and supports customers?
So Microsoft has been on quite a long and very exciting journey over the last years, actually since the inception, of course, 30 years ago. But with Satya, the journey took slightly different turn and really, and we've been, of course, eating our own dog food, so to say, quite a lot. I would say when we think about digital transformation at Microsoft, it's about how do we use the tools ourselves, how do we live the digital world, and in particular around data, and of course, how do we help the customers? And one of the things when I started at Microsoft, I think is so interesting and so impressive is that we have a single source of truth when it comes to customers, for example. So all the customer data is in one place, which of course very much helps this notion of being able to leverage the data, and everybody has access, not necessarily to everything, but there is one point where we can find this data, which helps us really analyze and leverage the data for analytics, of course, but also to be able to be efficient, again, collaborating across different parts of the organization. Another interesting thing that Microsoft has done, and which has helped us coming from a strategy side, is it's something that we tended to spend a lot of time on when I started out, is we don't do forecasting, we have AI. So we have all the data in one place, and we can leverage that really to do our forecasting and really use the data we have. So it's about, of course, leveraging the data. And then the last thing, maybe as an example, and I can come back with more if needed. We, of course, when COVID happened, we thought a lot about, and even before that, of course, but accelerated by COVID, we think about how do you sell in a B2B setting? How do you go out and talk to customers when, well, you can't really go out to the customers? So how do you sell in a digital way? How do you leverage the data? How do you have a conversation with the customer and build that relationship? And because, again, we have that data available, we can, with the tools that we have, we can create information. So we send actually information to the sellers, and they will then get recommendations for what can they do, how do they interact. Here's information that is relevant for your customer. Again, creating that engagement and providing relevant information for the customer so they can have a digital engagement with the customers. And then, of course, there's the whole discussion with the customers. So where Microsoft is really providing the platform and the foundation for the customers to become digital and move to the cloud.
Thank you very much. So you mentioned data a lot. Sreedhar also mentioned data, that you need to use it. I wonder, sometimes you have so much data, but then you also need to leverage it. You mentioned AI. Sreedhar, you actually bought an IoT startup to capture data. Can you tell us how you leverage that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting example because how data can actually become a business model, and you can monetize the data and make it more powerful. So this is an IoT company. Basically, what it does is that when we are into the renovation. So when you renovate a house, you do many changes in the house. So one of the things we said is that particularly in Denmark, this is a challenge we are facing is there is a lot of water leakage in many of the houses, and actually we are talking about 20% waste of water in cities, and it is very much aligned to our philosophy of making the world a better home, to basically conserve the natural resources. So the water is, so we said, how we can do that? So we basically came up with this idea where this IoT company can have a sensor attached to the water meter, and this smart water meter gives you the data wherever you're sitting. Basically, it tells you if there is any inconsistency, if there are any issues, quickly you are given an alert, and you use the data not only to alert the house owner, but you also alert the craftsman or the plumber who is going to fix it, and you also alert the utility service, which is a public utility service, saying, hey, this is a problem happening in this place. So you're actually using the data to alert all the stakeholders and bringing this value and saying that concretely you're able to see that you're able to quickly fix the problem and avoid wastage of water. This is something which this is just one example. I think many such small initiatives, and it's actually good to pick up some startup companies like that, because their mindset is very different from a large industrial group. I mean, we think things which are quite complex and big things, whereas the startup company, their whole concept is to just see from the pain points and how do we address these pain points, and that's where the value proposition becomes much more compelling.
Thank you. So you mentioned, as I said, you bought this startup. Let's take a bit of a bird view perspective, because when we talk about digital transformation, we often talk about where we want to get, and now not so much how we want to get there. This is something that, Pascal also mentioned in our previous chat. So just quickly, Stefano, you want to add something to what
maybe
you heard?
on the data, we took a very similar approach in a very different domain. We also invested in a startup in Ticino, which is called Artificially. Our idea was, since we have 300 salespeople and 300,000 customers, we should optimize the way our salespeople invest their time to acquire new customers. And so we started developing a machine learning algorithms to do some really opportunity scoring and using this machine learning algorithms to drive the sales force. So every morning when a sales rep gets up in the morning, they see in our CRM system, they see a scoring on the possible leads or possible deals they are going to score. And so this is really a weighted pipeline of customers they should visit, and this is generated by learning about their success in the last couple of years. And by implementing this, we could really increase the effectiveness of the sales force by about 10%. And last year, during the pandemic, we had a tremendous acceleration. We won 60,000 new customers. And this was really based on these algorithms provided by the startup. I agree with you, Natarajan. It's a different mindset. They took unstructured data and they say, don't bother in structuring the data. Give us the data. We develop the algorithms. You give us the feedback of the customers. We take the deals. It's a black box approach, and machine learning will tell you what's the best for you. It was an interesting project because it brought a lot of success. It had a lot of internal resistance because the salespeople didn't trust the black box. But by the time when they learned to follow and they trusted the system, they saw the success increase, and so the system is really getting better every week. My message would be to all the leaders: trust machine learnings. At the beginning, it's a black box, but you have to trust it and you feed the data and get the algorithms to learn, and you will get astonishing results.
Thank you very much. I see a lot of nodding as well. Marina and Sreedhar, you seem to all agree.
Absolutely. I mean, 200%.
Okay.
It's powerful.
I think, you said some words that resonate so much, the idea of resistance. We do have a strategy of bringing data in an enterprise data platform, but what does it mean in a company like us with over 108 markets? And of course, as everybody, many different functions. So Germany likes to own their data, and Japan likes to own the data, and marketing likes to own the data, and sales and finance. So convincing people that let's put the data where everybody can have access, because also the machines can learn much more if the data is richer. So I think it's the word resistance it resonates, but also how good it is to then engage with startups. We do have what we call digital innovation labs that are constantly talking to startups and saying, that's the mission of VAT. What can you do to help us? And one of those startups has helped find patterns that make consumers migrate out of combustible cigarettes to reduce risk products. And they found out, what makes someone migrate and someone stay there. Because not necessarily that's all the case. People give it a try and then go back to the norm. And they learned this is one market where, for example, the US, where the migration happens a lot towards baby products. And then you would think, in the Nordics and Europe, the alternative product that resonates with consumers are modern oral pouches. In Asia are heated tobacco. And you could say, oh, this is different. But guess what? It's not. You bring data together and the same learnings from, across the ocean that is solutioning to deliver the better tomorrow. The machine knows what to do to adapt to a different environment. So in the end, I think the best way to win over resistance is showing winning cases. I think, as you said, Stefano, that you're going to be able to sell more, right? And if you do that, eventually you have more people coming towards to you. What I find beautiful about leveraging data is that I think very quickly you get to a point that the organization asks you more than what you are able to do. It's difficult to get started, but once people start seeing the results, it's an avalanche because it does deliver value. So my only recommendation is that don't let this blocking resistance stop you at the beginning, because it will turn the curve and it will be great.
Thank you. Very short, because I'd like to go to the next topic. Go ahead, very short.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say that data gives confidence to the customer, and if you're able to provide precise numbers, we have this business of improving the comfort in any living space, and when you give them a data, if you improve this is what the benefit you get. You're listened, you're heard.
We spoke a lot about what actually works well, how digital transformation actually happens. What we didn't speak is how do we get there? We had two examples with buying a startup, and we also didn't speak about the challenges and pitfalls. But first, how do we get there? Something Pascal and I just quickly spoke previously, or in a previous chat. As you said, some have incubators internally, have their startups, they have a specific person. How do you see it? What's the way to get there, if there is such a way?
I think to recognize, and all of us, let's say, Salt is much smaller than some of the other companies represented here, but still at 1 billion in revenues, it's not tiny. The digital forefront will always be occupied by startups. Why? Because they have high caliber entrepreneurial employees. They have very few employees, so they're almost agile by nature. They have no legacy to tie them down, so they will be able to work on the latest systems with the latest tech. And they will have very simple processes and services because there's no customer base or legacy product line to cater to. So if you're in a larger organization, you always look at these small startups with envy and you think, I would like to be like that. But you don't have the same caliber of people. You don't have the same simplicity of a business model, and you are to some extent tied down by technology. So the question always arises, what's the best way to go? And I think there is no single route which is the best route to go. And I've seen in my previous life many companies taking different approaches. What some companies do, as you say, they try to create their own startups. I have seen that work if you create a true startup, but then you need to basically staff this startup with externals. What I've personally never really seen work is when corporates play at being startups. So they put their own employees into a startup, they start coming to work in sneakers and pretend to be in Silicon Valley. I personally have not seen that really work, because it's a different mindset, it's a different operating model. And at the same time, I think it's also important to remain realistic. If you really want to transform your legacy organization, you need to recognize that it's complex. So if you simply digitize something that is complex, you'll end up with something complex yet digital, which is not necessarily where you want to be. So I think there's also a strong notion of simplifying what you do to the maximum to be able to provide the kind of customer experience that you want to have. So I think in the end, personally, I think you need to do a lot more work with your legacy organization. Simply outsourcing it may make it easier, but I'm generally skeptical, because I think in many cases it will not solve the root issues that you need to tackle, even though it will give you some nice early success.
Great, thank you. Stefano, you want to add?
Yeah, as an engineer, I agree a lot with Pascal. The world is black and white. You have to be the best at what you do, and your legacy organization is probably not the best at the future of your company, what you should be doing. So in the approach that worked well for us is to say, we have two words, the old word, and it's about simplify, efficiency. And the new word is about building growth and driving growth around your services. And it's a dual organization in the book, in the Agile book, where you have a part of the organization with a totally different culture that builds a new business, and a legacy organization that drives down costs. And then the question is, from the CEO perspective and the board perspective, when do you make the switch? And how fast you make the switch, and how radical you make the switch. And probably there are different companies that do it in a different way. For us, it worked very well to have this kind of clarity to say, the future business is moving in a different direction, and we cannot build the future business on our legacy, because our legacy is not an asset, is completely irrelevant.
So for that, you sometimes need an outside perspective. And I know that at Saint-Gobain, you recently appointed a digital officer from outside who reports directly to the CEO. So bringing an external perspective, that is part of your strategy then?
Yeah, I mean, as I think both of the speakers said, if you're going to use the legacy, you're not going to make a radical change. I think it's important to get outside in view. So, and then you need to position it. Historically, IT is like, okay, it's a support function. It's part of maybe it would be reporting to the CFO, but it didn't have that center, and given that importance that, it's an integral part of the business strategy. And you cannot make it as a support function. It has to be in the front line. So that's why we changed this organization. We actually also recruited many young geeks, literally. I mean, we have 1,700 digital experts in the organization working on data, driving the culture of data in the organization, so that people start looking at data and not just say based on their gut, look at the facts, figures, and see how you can use this data to bring benefit and value to the customer.
Sorry if you hear some noise behind. There's some moving in the back. Thank you, Sreedhar. Marina, you are actually that person at BAT. You have this special role dedicated to bringing digitalization forward within BAT, also reporting directly to the CEO. So that's part of your strategy there, to have a specific person dedicated to that.
Yeah, I mean, I am definitely that person. So joined the management board 2 years ago when the position of Chief Information Digital Officer was just created, reporting directly to the CEO. So, of course, the huge, belief and support from the CEO, from the main board, that digital needs to have a seat at the table. That is not just a back office, behind finance. But one person doesn't make it. So if you look to my organization, over 20% of the people were not here 2 years ago, because we had to bring new skills on data science, on data technology, and many different new technologies and new ways of working. But to make it really work, I think what is something that I've been passionately driving and been working with all my colleagues on the board is what we call Digital DNA program. So we are training the entire organization on storytelling, on design thinking, on agile, on data sciences, and of course also exponential technologies. because as I think we said, all of us in our definition of digital transformation, it is not about the what, it's about the how we get it done and deliver results. So making sure that the entire organization is getting skilled up and prepared to leverage these new ways of working, those technologies that are out there. So yeah, and I think a second thing that has been helping a lot driving the transformation, still a long way to go, is the setup of a digital committee. I chair the digital committee, and the CEO and several of my colleagues in the management board are part of it, where we jointly look into what we call digital KPIs that are nothing but business KPIs enabled by data, technology, and new ways of working on a constant basis to see what can we do different, because it's not up to one leader to make it happen. It's honestly, to the entire leadership team to make digital transformation happen and make it measurable and less, a buzzword consulting. I think it's very much needed and appreciated, because people want to do it right. If you tell them the obvious, that is, selling direct to consumer on e-commerce is one of the digital KPIs, and we need to look that constantly, they will do it. But to be very honest, prior to making this statement that seems simple, people are looking to total revenue, and you're not necessarily prioritizing the digital channels that at the beginning are very small and would not get your attention, because you tend to look to the bigger things. So making sure leadership is putting their eyes on the things that are drivers of transformation doesn't mean today they are the biggest source of results, but they're the biggest source of the transformation itself.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marina. And something Henriette also mentioned at the very beginning, the culture. It's not about one person, right? It's not going to change the whole thing. You kind of need to ingrain it within the culture. Is that one of the main pitfalls that you see?
Well, I think actually one of the things that Marina mentioned is the learning, and that's a really, really important element of this. I mean, when you go through this, I see this as a change journey, right? It's not about the technology itself, it's about how you do things differently thanks to technology. And if you think about strategy implementation, it's about asking people to do something differently. And this is so important when you do that. You have new ways of working, for example, the data across silos, because you need to collaborate and be agile, and new ways of business models or growth opportunities. You need to train people, both in the tools, but also in how we work, and therefore the learning element is so important. And that's why at Microsoft we spend a lot of time on learning, and it's a fundamental part of the culture, being curious, but also spend quite a lot of time also supporting our customers and others in Switzerland to help understand what does it mean to leverage these tools and how do you do that. But for me, the culture element is looking at this as a change journey, but the learning element itself is so crucial. And today I think the companies that are really successful are the ones that really spent time and invest in learning.
Absolutely. Good. Well, then I'd like to open up for a few audience questions, and we have there one for Pascal. I will read it to you. As a telecommunications company, do you feel the market expects you to be at the forefront of digital transformation and services? When you provide purely digital services, what is the vision of your company to achieve that next step in digitalization?
So I think the expectation is certainly there. I would absolutely subscribe to that. I think, unfortunately, if I'm perfectly honest, I think we are lagging somewhat behind that expectation. I do think the digital forefront is typically occupied by the more nimble startups in our field, but we're doing our best to keep the gap as small as possible. In terms of vision, I think it's important to. I think there's one aspect which is more the consumer vision, but it's important to separate also a bit what we might want as a company versus what the consumer wants. And I think typically there's a bit of a stretch between the two. So most telecom companies, they aspire to be the customer's digital companion, taking the customer by the hand into the digital world together. Whereas I think most customers would rather not hear from us at all. They just want the stuff to work, and they want it to be simple, and they want to have a hassle-free experience. And I think that's that's certainly something I would aspire to be able to provide, something which is simple in use, something which is free of physical goods. So it will be the full service will be fully digitized, so no logistics, and free of human interaction to the maximum extent possible. I think that's sort of the direction the industry is taking as a whole. I think for the organization, and here I would build on what Henriette said, because I fully agree. When we think about transformation, we often think it's going from A to B. There is no B. This is not about going somewhere. I think my view of a great organization is an organization where people come to work at the beginning of each month. They say to themselves, what am I going to do differently than last month? Not because it's going to necessarily be better, but because people keep trying new stuff to see what works, what doesn't. And I think once you arrive there, then you're actually at B, which is it's a never-ending process. And I think this agility is absolutely key, this adaptability. And once you're there, I think you're also future-proof as an organization.
So digital transformation, actually, there's no end to it, right? It's a process.
Perfectly agree. It's digital. Now we talk about, in our case, it's digital marketing based on, programmatic advertising based on platforms like Google and Facebook and Instagram, social reputation management. But the next thing is coming. It's voice. Voice is going to revolutionize the way consumers interact with our companies in the B2C space. So, which kind of role do we play there? When do we do the switch? Which kind of innovation do we bring there? I think customers expect us to always be on top, but not always. They will not always buy the latest stuff. So the big challenge is to be on top of things, to understand the trends, to build the future services, but to take customers slowly into this journey so that they can digest everything we give them. And especially, as Pascal was saying, customers want a simple package, very convenient, that solves the current problem. But I also believe that customers want a bit of sparks innovation. They want to know and to build this trust that your company is really also not there for today's problem, but also for the future. And for that, you have to bring a bit of innovation. Yesterday, we announced a free product. It's a small thing. It's a restaurant booking platform that works with voice. And that's something that our customers love. I don't think in Switzerland you will book restaurants and make a restaurant reservation by voice. But customers love to hear that in the future you could do this, and so they will buy more of the current technology and current solutions.
Okay, then a quick reminder to the audience, you can of course send in your questions to our speakers via the Q&A function, and we have a few minutes left for those. Henriette, is there anything anyone wants to add to what has just been said? Otherwise, yeah, go ahead, Marina.
Just to build on that, right? So the digital transformation is changing in the end the offers that we have to our customers and consumers. So in BAT, we are about to launch, a connected device. So for a company that would, sell a product in the past and that's it, it goes with the consumer to you're selling something that you're going to stay with them throughout the journey on their consumption. It's absolutely a new experience for the consumer, but also for us as an organization. We need to change a lot of our process, because then the delivery of the flavor, the delivery of the strains, the delivery of the innovation will be done in a much more intimate model with the consumers. So with innovation comes the responsibility and the absolutely, imperative. You need to change our internal process. This is not something that is different for the consumer, it has to be different for everybody inside the organization. So I'm very excited, but at the same time, I know this is not going to go perfect, because that's not how innovation works nowadays. We go into learning, and in our pre-pilot experiments, you would be surprised on how much the consumers can accept of something that doesn't work, perfectly, as long as they are part of the solution and they can feedback. So it's a very different, old mindset. Of course, no compromise on the quality of the product before launch, no compromise on the compliance of the product. But after that, the consumers are very open to interact with companies and help make the product better. But I think in the past, at least for a consumer goods company, that would be impossible to imagine, right? You need to plan and test to perfection before you put in the hand of the consumers. With digital services, there is this openness for let's go together.
Thank you, Marina. Then maybe let's talk quickly about the most important enablers for digital transformation to happen smoothly. Maybe the infrastructure. Recently, I actually moderated an event for a cloud provider. So maybe Henriette, coming from Microsoft, how do Swiss companies embrace the cloud, and what are the most important enablers?
So, of course, the Swiss companies are embracing the cloud, and I would say the large companies all have a plan. So they are in the cloud. They have maybe even several, many of them have several cloud providers, and they know how to work with cloud technology. When it comes to the smaller companies, of course, it's looking a little bit differently. I would say that in comparison to maybe some of our neighbors in the north, we're probably in Switzerland not quite as far ahead, but cloud is being embraced by the Swiss companies. To Pascal's point, moving to the cloud is of course not so easy. So, what some companies could do, or theoretically you could do, is take what you have today and move it into the cloud, and that is perfectly possible. But that doesn't really give you the advantage of the cloud, and therefore the journey to the cloud becomes a bit complicated when you then, at the same time, need to modernize. So that journey is, coming back to my point before, is also a change journey, because you need to think about how do you simplify when you move to the cloud, and that journey requires some thinking about your business model, about how you leverage the data, what is it you want to do, how does it fit into your overall strategy. So taking your apps and moving them into the cloud, of course, some of them cannot be moved, and then you need to think about how do you do that then, and how do you modernize and simplify in the process. Then at the same time, you also need to think about your operating model, because you're going to leverage data and use information in a different way. So that thinking around what is your operating model when you move to the cloud is also very important. And then the data governance, of course, again, coming back to the data, what data do I have? How can I access it? Is it reliable? What about compliance? Who can leverage it? Are also very, very important topics. And in Switzerland, of course, the topic of compliance and where does the data actually reside is a very, very important topic, especially for regulated industries such as banks and, of course, the government. So that's an important question that has been very much debated over the last couple of months in Switzerland, and an important question for these companies.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you very much, Stefano.
I think Marina made a great example of a very painful transformation for a company, going from push to be a platform, to have the subscription model. You probably sell flavors and so on in the future. And if you do this shift from push, one product, you push it on the market and you see what happens, to having a dialogue with the consumers, collecting data, then I think building this capability internally will take too long. The cloud, there is no alternative to moving to a cloud and using what's there from AWS, from Azure, or from Google for all the machine learning piece. So if you want to be fast and really have this, leverage what everybody else has learned, you have to move to a cloud and have a completely different infrastructure. If you start to build this from scratch with your own people, it will take ages. Imagine building a dialogue platform with your consumers where you collect data, you have machine learning algorithms, it has to be scalable. This will cost a fortune, and you will need people to build this yourself that are completely different from what the people you have today. So we use AWS, Google Cloud, Azure Cloud for different pieces, and this accelerated a lot our time to market and make this journey possible.
Thank you very much, Stefano. Then there's another question for the panel coming from the audience. Does the panel think the cyber threats will hamper the digitalization efforts in certain industries, that is critical infrastructure, and potentially could lead to subpar solutions for customers? So that's for the whole panel. Who wants to go first? Yes, Pascal.
I would say absolutely, but I think obviously, all kinds of threats lead to subpar solutions and hamper efforts. Just look at, let's say, air travel pre-COVID. Because of security threats, terrorist threats, of course, the air travel experience is not as seamless and smooth and easy as you would like it to be, because we need to take precautions. But is that, in the end, a subpar solution for the consumer? let's say, flying with a normal airline is not as convenient as taking a private jet, although I wouldn't know. But in the end, it's for your own safety. So I think we have the same in the digital world. Of course, we will not be able to advance at the pace that we would technologically be able to, because we need to take certain precautions that technology doesn't end up being used against us. And for sure, it will happen. It happened just recently in the US with the pipeline. It will happen again, and we will see bigger and bigger accidents happening, which will be setbacks. But I think that's not an argument against technology. I think the solution to this is also in technology. So we need to embrace that. We need to deal with the challenges, and we need to take it one step at a time, as with all innovations that we've already established today.
Thank you. Any further? Yes, go ahead.
So for me, there's no gain without a pain. When you run a business, you do have to deal with different challenges. So as Pascal said, I mean, you just have to take precautions. I mean, that should not stop you to innovate. That should not stop you to make the transformation happen in the organization, because digital, again, as I said, it's a must. It's a must to survive. It's a must to succeed. So just because you have some threat of cybersecurity, which is a real threat, I mean, you need to be extremely vigilant, but that should not deter us from taking steps to transform the organization and move forward.
Great. Anything to add?
One question is the cybersecurity. The other one is the privacy debate. Who does the data belong to? Who has the right to access the data, to own the data, and who controls the data? And is there enough digital literacy in the society to make sure that everybody understands this? And I think this is not a threat to digitalization. It is a blessing to digitalization. That our industry thinks about what do we do with the data, and about the whole ethic part of artificial intelligence, of data management, of data-driven business. I think it's a very, very important and a very healthy debate for the industry. This is why I don't think cyber threats and data governance and privacy debate will slow down digitalization. I think will make digitalization better, and the consumer experience may be painful because I have to accept the cookies and accept this and accept that and manage my privacy setting, but it will make the industry more trustworthy, and long-term it will be a benefit for everybody, for the consumers, that they understand what they're doing, and for the companies that are working with the data, that they don't misuse the data for their own profits against the people that actually own the data.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Marina.
Yeah, just to build on, I think, two things that were said before. I think cyber no different than everything on digital transformation. The how we approach it has been evolved a lot lately. And I think in the past, we would all do our cyber gap assessment and build this 5-year roadmap of closing gaps and building capabilities. I think this is still there, but more and more, we are fixed approach, the purple team, red team approach, that, if you wait for big programs to come to fruition, maybe it's already too late. So I think this is one, we need to bring the mindset of digital transformation also on how we manage cyber. I think this helps. We learned that from other organizations and I shameless copying it in BAT. And the second one, I wouldn't pretend to explain better than Henriette, cloud migration, how to do, not to do. She's the expert. But I think what helps organizations is having this partnership with the CFO and other leaders, that it's much easier if you get prepared to be in the cloud before you really need it, because it's not an easy journey. So you have to have a little bit this leap of faith that it's going to pay off, because by the time that you need is already too late to try to put things in the cloud. So that's a conversation that we always have in our leadership teams, that for different areas of the business, maybe I don't need it now because I still don't need the level of flexibility or growth that I have. But let's take the step when it's still time to get ready on time.
Thank you, Marina. Henriette, you wanted to add something?
I just wanted to make one slight clarification, just one addition. I would actually argue that when you go to the cloud, you actually have an opportunity to add security and be more efficient in your security and have a broad way of thinking of all the data in the cloud, I think that should prevent us from leading to subpar solutions. Of course, that will open up new frontiers, so to say, for digital and cyber threats. But we shouldn't hold back from innovation and digitization because of that, because there will always be threats. We will never get rid of it. And again, moving data to the cloud will help us to treat that as one. A different way of thinking about security and be more efficient on the security side.
Thank you. Then there's a specific question to Sreedhar from the audience. Which aspects of the digitalization do you consider should be prioritized in the upcoming years according to the market trends of the new generations?
Customer experience. I think customer is the king. If you don't occupy the mind space of customer, you will not succeed. You can have a great technology, you can have a fantastic value proposition, but the success would be only when you are able to convince your customer, the guy who's using your products and solutions. And if you are not able to convince him, you are not able to reach out to him, you're not able to occupy his mind space, you will not succeed. So to me, that's very, very important to focus on customer experience, see how you can convince them. I think the other thing we need to remember is that, I think the business leaders should see digital as an opportunity to offer new solutions, services. I mean, that's something which has become a very critical aspect to be successful in the business.
Thank you, Sreedhar. Then there's a question to Marina. As you just started from scratch to develop a digital strategy, how did you do it at BAT?
So when I joined, I was asked to, no surprise, develop a digital strategy. And the first thing I said was no. We are still in the process of refreshing the company strategy. Let's do it. And then I do the digital strategy to support the company strategy. I think that's the first, right? It's very important that we don't have a digital transformation objective. We have a company objective. And in our case, we are here to help accelerate the creation of a better tomorrow. So, I mean, the steps are really trying to find this balance on how technology and how change in ways of working and culture are going to enable the acceleration of the company's objectives. So it's a very, very tight link and has to come, together. So I think that would be my thing, because I think sometimes we people sitting in technology and digital teams have this huge mission of building a digital transformation strategy, but you ask the functions across the group and they don't have their own functional strategy, and then it doesn't work. So I also feel that once you do it, if the strategy of the organization is right, your digital strategy probably is going to be right and it's going to stick. So what we wrote down beginning of 2019 as the refresh of BAT strategy and the joint, digital transformation strategy has survived COVID and just proved to be accelerating in a year or more than a year of pandemic. So that's what makes it strong, is a tight link with the objectives that we have as an organization.
Thank you very much. We have about more than a minute left, and I want to use that very short time to just wrap it up. Maybe if everyone can think of something either you want to share with the audience or something you learned along the way. We didn't speak too much about pitfalls. If there is something that you experienced and we're like, okay, this is what you learned that you need to share, let's do that. Who wants to go first? Shall I pick? Go ahead, Henriette.
Okay, well, I'll pick up what Marina just said. I think a super important topic. The digital strategy is not a separate strategy. So that is something that it needs to be integrated. It's about where the company is going. And to the point before, where do you start? Well, I think it depends a little bit on what sort of company you are. If you're a consumer-oriented company, then you think about the customer and the customer interactions. Lead with the need. Or if you're a manufacturer, I would say you focus on the operations. But digital is not separate. It's not a project on the side. It's part of the overall strategy.
Thank you, Stefano.
Given the nature of our business, our learning is that you have to start fresh. Don't be afraid to make a radical move, disrupt. Don't care about the past. Just look at the future, build something new, and then bring the past into the present, into the future. So it's really a very disruptive approach. Forget, the 100 years of history of the company. Just, think about your USP, what you use for the future, and think about a completely new world based on your unique capabilities and build it from scratch.
Pascal, any learnings?
I think, stay curious and never stop trying new things. The rest will take care of itself.
Everything is easier said than done, right? There's a lot of work. Sreedhar.
Yeah. So time is the essence of everything. Just act. Don't just keep questioning. Just act. I think it's important to move fast.
Marina?
Yeah, don't everything that was said, plus don't fall in love with technology, fall in love with what can be done through technology.
Thank you very much, Marina, Sreedhar, for joining remotely, and Pascal, Stefano, and Henriette for joining me here on location. Thank you very much.